What is up, everybody? Isaac here with Civil Engineering Academy. Excited to be with you on another podcast episode. Thanks for liking. Thanks for subscribing. I'm always surprised who hears our podcast, whether we're helping you on your journey to become a professional engineer or whether you just care about listening to civil topics that help people. That's what we're here for. So we do appreciate that. Today, I'm excited to bring a repeat guest back onto the show. His name's Jeff Perry, and he is an expert career coach and author now, talking about leadership and specifically the intentional engineer. You want to check this one out. So author of The Intentional Engineer, I bring him on to talk about it. The title of the book is called The Intentional Engineer, A Guide to a Purpose-Driven Life and Career for Engineers and Technical Professionals. Jeff shares his whole story in here, earning his mechanical engineering degree and determining what he really wanted to do with his life to become an intentional engineer and living life with intention, finding purpose in what he's doing. And that's really how he kicked off everything that he's doing in the leadership and career space. So I wanted to bring him on to talk about his book, how he wrote it, why he wrote it, everything that it's about. We get into it today, and I think you're going to enjoy it because there's lots of good wisdom in here if you're finding yourself on this career path of civil engineering specifically, and you're trying to figure out what you like, what you don't like, and really what you want to do to live with purpose and intentionality. So anyway, thanks for being here. It's a great interview. It's going to be coming up right after this. See you in a minute. All right, Jeff, we're live. We're rocking and rolling. Thanks for jumping on again to the Civil Engineering Academy podcast.
Yeah, fun to be back. Let's have a great discussion here.
Yeah. A lot's, I think, changed over the last time we chatted. I know you've come out with a new book. I got it right here, The Intentional Engineer. Check that out. Jeff Perry, A Guide to a Purpose-Driven Life and a Career for Engineers and Technical Professionals. Gave it a listen, also read it. Great book. A lot of great material in here. I'd love to unpack what was the thought process to create this. Why did you make this book?
Yeah, well, and thanks for reading it and checking it out, Isaac. So this word of being intentional has been a through line in a lot of my work over the last few years, where I've worked really deeply with hundreds of engineers across disciplines who are trying to make some sort of transition or upgrade in their career or leadership in alignment with their life as well. And so it wasn't originally there, but the word of intentional or intentionality emerged over the course of time as a real theme for the way that I worked with people and what I was trying to help build inside of people. And so it's been a few years now that I created a newsletter on LinkedIn, and I called it the Intentional Engineer Newsletter. And so I was starting to make this theme be part of how I talked about, and then having written about this, coached, I had all these stories of people who had moved through some of these changes and really gotten clear on what they wanted, upgraded their mindsets, and learned how to communicate who they really were and the value that they delivered. Then I had a mentor that said, "Hey, when are you going to write your first book?" And I was like, I don't know. And I always felt I had a book or more in me. And eventually it was just kind of this decision. Sometimes we have those little moments where it's like, hey, I'm going to commit to this thing that I've been putting off to the side for forever, and I'm going to do this. And so, so I put it together, and some other pieces fell in place to get some mentors and people who could help me go through the publishing process, which is something I knew nothing about. And made it happen. And so, it was July of 2023 when I decided I was going to write a book, and the book came out October 23rd of 2023. So it was about a 3-month process.
So quick.
And I was pretty aggressive with that, but I think still came out as something. It took longer to do the audiobook. That didn't come out till.
Which is your own voice, by the way.
Yeah, it is. So if you like my sultry voice here, you can listen to 3 or 4 hours of it in the audiobook. But yeah, and so people can, there's a lot more on the book, but people can go to theintentionalengineering.com to go learn more about it.
Awesome. So we kind of mentioned this earlier, but I mean, typically engineers, they need something that kind of forces them into hitting the goal. I mean, we all get kind of a little lazy about stuff, and there's something, a deadline. I don't know what it was, but what was that for you in writing this book? What got you over the finish line?
Yeah, so the forcing function for me is I had an event that I was going to be speaking at, and then also had like an exhibit table. It was an engineering society conference that they were bringing me out to do some of this work and speak to the engineering group. And so I kind of got this idea in my mind, how cool would that be to have my book there on the table that I could share and give to people? And that was the forcing function. So everything I backed up to the end goal is I want to have my book there on the table, and everything backed up to what needs to happen. What are the milestones I need to be able to get that? So I knew how long it would take me to get some books printed and when I need to submit things. And then, everything backed up. When do I need to be through certain drafts and go through the editing process and everything so that could happen. And pretty much I created kind of a 12-week plan and lined it out and was able to
busted it out.
Yeah. So it was a sprint, and it's not a mega book. Like, it's a pretty short, accessible.
Oh, it's great.
Book
Yeah.
you can get through in a few hours, but most engineers don't want to sit down and feel like they're going through a slog anyway. I tried to make it pretty accessible with enough of the background and the why, what we're doing, and also really action oriented. Every single chapter has take intentional action section to say, okay, here you've learned the idea, but what are you going to do with it? And go do this activity. Right.
That's awesome. Well, you begin the whole book about feeling lost in your life and your career and the direction you were headed. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit, but I'm also curious, like, if you've been helping people, do you see common themes that you see as you've been working with people, what people feel most lost in, or where they're losing their direction?
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, real quick part of my own story is a number of years ago, which was the forcing function that led me to start my work that I do now and the coaching, the training work. But I had some realizations around some of the things that I liked and I didn't like about what I was doing. I'd worked at some really large organizations and in a smaller organization. I loved a lot of things around that. I wore a bunch of different hats, but I also had opportunities where I was doing kind of coaching and training internally, and that unlocked some things that I really loved to do and working with the human element there. And then there was an organizational change that was going to put me into a position that I was pretty sure wasn't going to be a great fit for me. I kind of moving in from where I thrived well to be a creator and starting new things and moving things forward to kind of being a maintainer of existing stuff and processes, which is not where I thrive. And I had enough awareness to know that. And so I was open enough where with my leadership to say, hey, this isn't going to work out great for me, but that also means it's not going to work out great for you if you put me in this position. And so we explored some other things. Eventually that didn't work out, and I left and eventually decided to start my own thing. But being lost was like, hey, on paper, everything was good. Like the company was cool. Like my family was good. We owned our house and I was paid well, and like everything on the surface, like, seemed really great. So why am I so unsatisfied?
Right.
Right. And I almost felt guilty to do that. And that's basically the common theme that I would say that people come to me for help with. There's something in their life or career, or certainly the intersection of that they are unsatisfied with, whether they are unemployed, and that's its own issue, and trying to accelerate their path to get back into a cool position, or they feel like they've stalled out and there's no growth path for where they're at. That's a very common thing. they're trying to break into leadership or grow in their leadership. Where I've had people in their first leadership position, I've had people in executive vice president levels that I've worked with, and they're trying to break into how do I build my executive presence and everything too. But there's something that feels stalled or stuck or lost and unsure. And they say, I could do all sorts of things here, but I don't know what to do, and I don't have the confidence to do that. And so they get stuck in that analysis paralysis, where they don't believe in themselves for one reason or another. And they're like, I need some help. And that's where I come in. And it's super fun to have that front row seat to help people make some big changes.
It's way cool. Could you, is there one or two examples that you've got maybe top of mind that you could share of somebody that you've helped? Like, where were they stuck? How did you help them?
Yeah, so a really fun one, and I mention her in the book. I use her name Kim in the book, and I changed all the names of the stories in the book, so it could make people mostly anonymous, but I'll still call her Kim. She was a experienced PhD level engineer, and it worked across multiple disciplines. And currently, at the time, she was at a small consulting company. We're talking like less than 20 people. And she recognized that she loved digging into the people side of things in addition to the really deep technical stuff, where she could run stuff on leadership, the project management. She loved managing stakeholders and really figuring out what they really needed instead of just executing on the technical work. But she didn't know that there was even something that would fit that mold, where she could also still use her technical chops. The way that she described it, she's like, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And that was really interesting. And a realization was like why that was so stressful for her, because growing up, both of her parents hated their work. And she grew up with that, and they just sort of went through the motions. And she's like, I don't want to live like that. And so we worked through getting clarity on what she wanted to be when she grew up, figuring out how to figure out what that was and go make that happen. In the course of a few months, she realized that technical project and program management was where she wanted to go. She found a new role in a new state that also aligned with some of her hobbies. She did professional mountain biking on the side. So where she moved to, she got a significant raise and a place that had awesome mountain biking, and cost of living was way lower than where she was at. So like everything aligned, and she's like, I just love it. And I actually just caught up with her about a month ago, and she's like, I just got my third promotion in a few years. And so it wasn't just that initial thing. It was like that continued growth trajectory, because she found that path and continued to be intentional about how she was moving forward. And so that's a super fun one. But anyway, I don't know if we want to do another one or not. But
maybe I can do a follow-up question there before we jump into another one. So it sounds like you really helped her with like a life and work balance there.
Yeah.
You have some fun equations that you talk about life and work balance in the book. Could you talk about that a little bit for people?
Yeah, sure. So think about it in a few different ways. Very, very commonly, we talk about work-life balance. And
hear all the time.
You hear it all the time. How do I find work-life balance? And usually that means like, okay, when I leave work, do I get to leave work? Or how many hours am I going to work, or whatnot, right? And that's fine. And it's words that we typically use. But one initial question to spark is like, am I living to work, or am I working to live? Right? And we work, I think, to support the life that we're trying to live. Like there's a necessity to pay bills. We want a house to live in, the place we want to be. We got family to take care of and all that stuff. And work fills that need. But it should support the life instead of detract everything from the life we're trying to live. So at minimum, switching from work-life balance. So let's put life first in that equation, to say life-work balance. So, because what we're trying to do is build a life that we really enjoy and we feel is fulfilling, not just career fulfillment. We're trying to find life fulfillment. So looking at the bigger picture in that direction. And then we can look at the word balance and consider, is balance really the word that we want? Because balance, think about the typical like scales of a balance, right? There's this tension. I feel like if I take away from one, I'm taking it away from the other, or if I move it from one to the other, then things are going to tip. And so we need to balance this. And so if I'm working more, that's taking from my life, or if I'm doing something in my life, I'm taking from my work and maybe diminishing my career possibilities. And I feel like that gets us in kind of a limited view of what this is really looking at. And so I love instead the way of thinking about alignment. So we put life work, and instead of balance, we say life work alignment. So instead of balance being static, it's unmoving. Alignment is thinking about it like a vector, like a force. Engineers understand force vectors and stuff like that, where
that stuff.
Our life and our our life and our work are two vectors that, if they're aligned in the right direction, then they magnify, they add together in the right direction instead of cancel each other out, because they are going in opposite directions, right? So when they're aligned, then everything magnifies in a much better way.
So I'm just curious, this is probably different for different people, but in a case like you, where you were just kind of not satisfied with the work you were doing, I guess, or the position that was thrown at you, and then you've started your own brand. I don't think you're advocating that for everybody in terms of like, hey, you should quit work and go start your own business and do your own thing. It's more, aligning whatever that work is to what your life is and the life you want to build.
Yeah.
I'm assuming
plenty of engineers who are interested in entrepreneurship as a path, right? And that's something to explore that if that's interesting for you. It's not for everyone. And most of the stories that I tell in the book are not entrepreneurs. They're engineers who are working in their engineering function or engineering leaders, and they're trying to grow there. But maybe they want to get into a different industry, or maybe it's a different role or function, or maybe in some cases they just need to change themselves in their current environment. Right? Just another story. I had a person who said, "Hey, I want to find my happy place in my career, and I don't know what that means or what that looks like. I want to find my happy place." And he was at the time, about 9 months into a new job, and he's like, "I don't like this." He'd been working for 15, 20 years. He'd been in the military, worked in a bunch of different companies, like just not enjoying this. And he thought that meant that he would have to move companies. But really, when we dug into it, it wasn't that he needed to change his environment. He needed to change himself in his existing environment. Because if he didn't change himself and his mindset and the way that he was thinking about other people in his career, he could go to another place and nothing would change because he was the same.
That makes sense.
And so he actually, through the course of working together, was able to shift some of that stuff and actually learn to enjoy where he was at. And then a few months later, something came to him that was a great opportunity that he's actually just loved and thrived in, and did eventually, but that he didn't need to make that change to feel that higher level of satisfaction and happy place. Because really, I think we put too much stock in the external circumstances and not enough of stock into our mindset and our orientation. So I like to say our orientation matters a lot more than our situation.
You also described kind of this hidden tool that people often don't use, and that's using a journal. Could you describe
It's not very hidden.
the secret tool, the secret way?
Right.
Could you describe the power of, I guess, journal writing, not only in your own life, because you do talk about that in the book, but how that could help others trying to discover a life of intention?
Yeah, my whole life I've been off and on journaling until a few years ago, and I took like an online course about journaling, and flipped a switch, and I said, I'm going to commit to journaling, and I've done it. I've probably missed, less than 10 days a year of journaling for the last few years. And it is transformed. Journaling is so cool because it lets you take, it has so many potential ways to use the power of writing and language to slow down our thought processes and create. I love, there's an old quote, Stephen R. Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, talks about like all things are created twice. First is kind of the idea, for a house or a structure, it's a blueprint, right? And for a life, it's a mission or a plan. For a day, it's, planning out your day or whatnot. And I think that writing in our journal has that opportunity to be this first creation for creating the day or the week or the month or the year or the life that we want to create before we create it physically, right? So that's one aspect to it. The other thing is it's so good to help us be introspective, reflective, and increase our level of awareness. And so we have the ability to reflect and ask ourselves questions like, hey, how did this day go? What could I have done to make this better? We can dig into things like gratitude. What are 3 amazing things that happened today? Or what am I just grateful for? Right? What's something I want to remember? These are some of the questions that I ask myself in a daily journal. But and then just to have other open journaling questions, whether they're structured around specific topics, and I have a bunch of journal prompts inside the book, and there's a corresponding workbook that people can get that has some of that space that they can then write in if they want, or just take out a blank piece of paper and what comes to mind, what needs to get out that maybe you've been suppressing for a long time. And that can be about work, that can be about personal relationships, that can be about uncertainties or challenges or things that you worry about. But sometimes when we just put pen to paper and get it out of our brains and there in front of us, then it feels like we have something we can do something with, and it helps us move through that process. So it just, journaling is so powerful.
I love that you brought that up, and I think you're a great example of doing that. I used to be a great journal writer, and now I'm not. I don't know what happened. Maybe it's 4 kids. You just crash at night, but maybe that's even a better reason to keep a journal. But I think if you are journaling, I can see that can help you be more intentional in the life that you want to live, because you're writing this stuff down as to what you want in your life. So
here's an idea for you on the kids stuff. So this comes from my wife's idea. We just got these little like pass back and forth journals with our kids. Only our oldest 2 are old enough to like read and write. But she's got one with one of our older kids, and I've got one. And most nights there's kind of some prompts and we write. And so we're passing this journal back and forth. So it's a way to journal and capture some stuff, but also create that relationship with the kids. So I don't know if that would be fun for you.
No, that is good. I think that would be
an idea there.
My wife's way better at that stuff.
Yeah.
But that is a great idea. One of the things you also mentioned in here is about discovering a zone of genius and really trying to unlock that, figure that out. Mm-hmm. What are some tips you have for people that maybe don't feel like they've discovered that yet? How do we unlock our zone of genius and really develop that?
Yeah, one might sound a little bit presumptuous to call yourself a genius or say we all have genius inside of us. But like, I really think it's true that we all have, like, we're unique, and we have ways of being and working and doing things that we do differently than most people. Okay. And so just like real quick, what the zone of genius is what makes you different, sets you apart. And it's different than, certainly being incompetent or even just competent in something. So that's kind of level 2. If you have zones of competence or zones of excellence, things that you're really good at, the zone of genius is something that really sets you apart. And 2 primary ways I talk about to do this is to, 1, find where you can be in flow. This comes from the researcher and author Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi and the principle of flow. And it's kind of where you lose yourself in the task. There's enough challenge there and you have enough skills to meet that. And you just are able to dig into that. And that's different for everyone. But it's not just what you're doing, but also the circumstances, the environment, and how you orient to create that experience. And that can be in your work life or just your personal life. Plenty of people I talk to that's, riding a bike or a motorcycle or creating, mini models or something, something arts and crafty where they just love being in that space. The other thing is to look at the combination of things that makes you, that makes you unique in terms of innate talents, experiences, and skills that you have and built over the course of your life, and say, hey, are there combinations of these things that there are very few people in the world who have that same combination, and it makes you different. And when you can look at that, like, hey, maybe there's something in this space that makes me me, and that can feed into a personal brand and how you communicate where you do your best work for potential employers if you're looking for a new job, or say, hey, how can I do more of this in my current job? Because when you do that, you're going to do some of your best work and deliver some of and you're going to be more satisfied and deliver some of the best value you can possibly deliver in your work. And so it's a win-win situation when we can do that.
I love it. As part of that, you talk about giving or receiving feedback. Yeah. And I'm curious if you could touch on that a little bit about what a gift it is when somebody does that. And I mean, some people get offended sometimes when they receive feedback, even if it's coming from a place that's good, even if they're trying to improve you. But could you talk a little bit about feedback and maybe how an engineer could approach someone to get feedback?
Yep. To get feedback primarily. I mean, there's obviously 2 sides of that. So no matter which side of it you're on, I learned from a mentor a number of years ago, and I love it. And, very simple idea is that truth is a gift. Okay. And so when someone is giving you feedback, if we can come at it from that perspective, that they're doing this because they're trying to give me a gift, and they may or may not deliver it in the most kind and gentle way, right?
Yep.
It may come from a frustrating place. Ideally, we would want to, if we're giving or anyone who is giving feedback, come from a place of like, I'm doing this because I care about you and I want your growth and development. It doesn't always come from there. But if we can receive it to say, this may or may not be 100% true, but what can I see and how can I adapt from this? Because we can't be everything to all people. Harken back to the journaling idea, like, hey, how can we process any feedback that we get with journaling or writing about what we hear or what we need to improve or work on there? We make some plans to do so, right? So just see that when there's feedback there, truth is a gift, and if it's being held back, then we're actually limiting opportunities for people to grow and develop and change.
I love that idea. I think it shows a little bit of humility if you're willing to go out and ask for feedback from somebody. I feel like I've done that a couple times in my life, but definitely could do it more. So if anyone's listening, I think that's definitely a sweet tip. There's so many more topics and questions that I have for you, Jeff, but I'm just going to point people to the book. Go check it out, The Intentional Engineer. Any last pitch for the book, Jeff, as we kind of wrap this one up?
Yeah, so go check it out, theintentionalengineer.com. You can get it print in Kindle or audiobook through Audible. And anyone who gets a copy of the book also gets a corresponding free digital workbook that comes with it. That's an editable PDF, or you can print it out if you want to. That gives you space to work through some of the exercise and activities inside of that. And then if you really want to accelerate and get serious about growing your career, then reach out to me. You can find me on LinkedIn or jeff-perry.com.
Awesome. Jeff's awesome. He's very active on LinkedIn. We'll make sure we link all that stuff in our show notes. Jeff, thanks for jumping on, sharing the sweet knowledge. We'll make sure we link all this too. So appreciate you doing this with me.
Perfect. Thanks, Isaac.
All right. See you later.
Cheers.